the house.
Boom, boom, boom. Alrighty.
Let me
Alrighty.
click through all these faces.
See if there's some names you recognize. I'm sure there'll be plenty
Oh
I
yeah.
don't recognize at all. Friends you've brought along with
What's
you.
up, guys? What's up, everybody? I love seeing all the smiles and the waves. Hello, hello. Oh, we have a cat. I have a visitor. I do have two cats. One of them is here. It's 1 in the morning in California where I am, so everybody's asleep except for the cats, of
Yeah,
course.
the cats are wide
One of
awake.
them's here. One of them's in the kitchen. So anyway, it's gonna be interesting to see if they behave themselves.
Alrighty. Alrighty. I think everything's running just fine. If not, I'm going to find out at the end, and that's on me. First and foremost, Professor Kendall, thank you so much for joining us to do this interview. For everyone who's here watching now, in case you're not aware, Kendall did just mention it's 1 in the morning. She chose to do the interview at a time which suits us because she's such a generous person, or just doesn't care about good sleep. I don't know. Kendall, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and you're very welcome. Yeah, so I feel like a little bit conflicted because I wanted to do the interview at a time that was good for you, but then I'm also like, you need to rest so you could train. Like, but here I am. But I'll rest tomorrow. Don't
That's it. You're a
worry.
professional athlete. You got to take care of yourself. Now, for
Yeah.
everyone who's in the Zoom chat, you guys know the drill. If you're watching on any of the other platforms as well, Facebook or YouTube, I can get your chat messages. You're always welcome to just drop a message in, and I'll try to throw your question in while we talk to Professor Kendall. As well, if you get too caught up listening and you don't get a chance to ask your question during the interview, at the end we'll try to squeeze in a little bit of time to have a chat to Kendall and ask some questions when I'm done with my turn asking all the questions. So, let's get into it. Professor Kendall, I want to talk a little bit about, or mostly about, your jiu-jitsu journey. You started training at a very young age, and then eventually start talking a lot about competition since I think that's something you have a lot to give us, a lot of wisdom to give us. So, you began training, I think, when you were about 5 years old. Could you tell us about how you started jiu-jitsu and the other martial arts you were training, I think, around the same time?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm 23 right now. I started jiu-jitsu when I was 5, and my dad is a black belt in Kyokushin karate, and he grew up in Georgia, which is on the East Coast, and at the time, Hickson Gracie was going around and doing those Gracie challenges where he would show up at gyms and put ads in the paper and say like, anybody come do anything to me and see what happens. Basically, is what it
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
And so my dad's instructors and they were like world class bare knuckle fighters, like really talented guys. They went to this thing, I think it was in Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, and they were like, we got it. What is this? Like, we have to do this. Like,
yeah.
this is, oh my God, like he's just choking and armbarring everybody. This is insane. So anyway, fast forward to the 90s, my parents moved to California specifically to train jujitsu because at the time there wasn't a lot of jujitsu on the East Coast. And I was born in 97, and then in the early 2000s I started training. So I got into it just because my dad was doing it, he liked it, and they thought I would have fun. I had a lot of energy, they thought I would just enjoy it. And I think the main thing throughout my jiu-jitsu journey as a kid is that it was never like forced upon me. I was never made to go. It was always
Mm,
just about having fun.
mm.
And I rarely didn't want to train, but if I did, they didn't make it a big deal. And I think that contributed a lot to the fact that I rarely had those feelings because it wasn't a pressurized situation of like pleasing my parents. It was all just like, do you want to go? Awesome. Do you not want to go today? Okay, no problem. Right. So when I was 7, I started judo. And the reason I started judo is because I wanted to compete more. And at the time, there weren't really any kids in jiu-jitsu. Well, there were
Uh-huh.
some, but not many. And there especially weren't any girls, right? So there were tournaments, maybe like once every 2 months or something for kids. Maybe that's kind of generous. And I wanted to compete more. So I started judo. That way I could compete like every other weekend.
At that
And
age of
I
7, you were already
did,
competing.
yeah, well, I competed like as soon as I could with like 5 and 6,
Yeah.
but there
Wow.
just wasn't a lot. There weren't a lot of tournaments to do, and
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu at the time wasn't super organized just yet because that was like 2003 to 2005, so it wasn't very established. But judo was really established, right? We have USA Judo and it's sanctioned, so there was a lot more organization. And I thought it would help my jujitsu, or my parents were like, "Yeah, this is good. They complement each other." When I was 13, though, I was doing gymnastics this whole time as well. And when I was 13, I went to high school. And in high school, I started wrestling because of two reasons. One, I really thought PE was just a waste time. I don't. You guys call it physical education in school? Yeah, PE.
Yeah.
I just was like, oh my god, why am I gonna like run around in a circle and do jumping jacks when I could do something fun? And here was my master plan was to do cheerleading in the fall and do wrestling in the winter because that's how our seasons work. And when I went to cheerleading tryouts, remember I've been doing gymnastics this whole time, so I was like really good at tumbling. I could do all these flips. I was like, for sure, I'm gonna make the cheer squad. Everyone was like, yeah, you're definitely gonna make it. It's me and 3 girls, and we all have a number, and I don't make the team. And I'm like heartbroken. I'm like, no way. Like, how did a girl on my group of 3 make the team when she has no experience? I'm like, I didn't. Turns out later, we didn't find out this for like 3 years later, but the numbers accidentally got switched. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I was so devastated about cheerleading, but I'm not going to PE. So I was like, I'm just going to join wrestling early.
We could have lost you to cheerleading. Oh my gosh.
I know.
What a win.
I know, right? And I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do PE, so I'm just going to go find the wrestling coach. And the wrestling coach was like, come back to me in the winter. And I was like, no, I'm coming now. And he was like, call me, in November, December, come back. And I was like, no, I'm joining wrestling now. He told that story at like our senior banquet, and I was like super persistent. And they didn't usually let freshmen do that. And he was like, okay, sure, whatever.
Was it because you're a freshman, or was it because women's wrestling was not as developed at that stage, or?
Definitely both, and I think the women's part was a little bit less like conscious, no one's going to come out and say like, no, because, well, people do. But in my high school, they weren't like, oh, you're a girl, so you can't join wrestling. It was more of like, oh, wait until the season, you can come do tryouts, because they don't just put you in the class on the team. You have to make the team first. And I was like, oh, for sure, I'm going to make the team. Like, let me in the class. But there also wasn't a women's team either. So there were like 2 or 3 girls in the wrestling team that were at the time. And then when I graduated, there was a big team, but it took a while to build. So went into wrestling, did that for a little over 5 years, almost 6 years. And I was really excited to do well because I was able to use my judo and jujitsu and had a really fun time. But I fell in love with it, and I started competing internationally for Team USA. And I was just, all my whole life revolved around the Olympics. So that took a big left turn. And my parents were still running jujitsu schools, so they were like, okay, all right, let's figure this out. Like, how are we going to get her to these camps? And how are we going to get her to Slovakia? They were so supportive. But looking back now, I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. I took them away from their whole situation. So I went to college and wrestled, still was wrestling for Team USA at the time. And at the end of my freshman year of college in Canada, actually I was in Vancouver at Simon Fraser University, but they wrestle with the NCAA. So it's still in the States, or still connected to the States. And so I was there. I came back, and long story short, I was having a hard time with weight cutting and just really, really struggling, like cutting from like 185 to 165 every other week. And I was really miserable. And wrestling just wasn't fun for me anymore. And I wasn't able to be healthy. I was just really, really messed up. And I was, almost passing out at weigh-ins and going to the hospital and stuff. So it got really, really dark at the end there. It got really. I love when you guys say Australian things. It makes me so happy. it always reminds me of like Ruby and Romina when I have Australian people in the States. Anyway, so it was really rough. It was hard, and like again, at the ripe age of 18, 19, I had my whole life planned, like, okay, this was like 2015 going into 2016. So I was like, I'm going to go to the Olympic trials in 2016. Everything in the Olympics revolves around quads. So the 4-year cycle. So I was like, I'm going to go to the trials, but it's not really my year. It's kind of like my warm-up year. Then in 2020, I'm going to make the team and win. And then in 2024, I'm going to do the same thing. And then after that, I'm going to be a sports psychologist for Team USA, because the wrestling team it was like the whole thing revolves around wrestling. So I'm like coming home from college, and any idea that I was like not going to wrestle anymore, like didn't exist for me. It would be like if I grabbed Romina and I was like, you can't do jiu-jitsu anymore, ever. And she'd be like, bro, what? Like, what are you talking about? It's my whole life. So, but it came down to that, right? It was my health. It was my health over wrestling at the end of the day. And it's not necessarily wrestling's fault. It's just how it happened.
Can I ask quickly? When you developed this passion for wrestling sort of over judo and BJJ, if they're the sort of three grappling arts you're training through your whole youth. What about wrestling did you fall in love with when it was something that you were super passionate about and wanted to, build your life around?
Well, I saw a career path and I saw a life path where, this is like the the 2010-ish time. I'm going into high school, and women didn't have a career in jiu-jitsu at the time. Like you either owned a school or you were broke, and that was it. And it's not to say that athletes don't struggle now, but there's a lot more of an opportunity now, especially if you know the right people and you know how to ask the right questions and get the right information and get the right guidance, I guess is the word I'm looking for. There is a career path, right? If you're the best. It's not the ideal, right? It's not like you have an NFL team and everybody, well, you guys don't have that, but it's like an NFL team.
We have other sports. We have sports.
I know, I respect it. And people can make, all these big salaries, but there's still more opportunity. At this time, I was like, I'm going to keep doing jiu-jitsu and then like maybe teach. And like, I don't really know if I can compete because it's not, remember my whole thing was the Olympics. I'm like, it's not the Olympics. And then I had a team. Like I was able to go with Team USA. I was able to travel all around the world and compete and train as an athlete. And in jiu-jitsu, it just wasn't quite that developed at the time. Whereas now, like, most schools where I am, they have a competition team and we get together and we travel together and we do all this stuff. That wasn't happening, especially for kids, like kids and women. That was not happening in that time. Like maybe some of the men would like meet up and do things, but so it was the idea that I could build a life around it, and I loved it, But when it came down to like, I can build a life around wrestling, or I can build a life around jiu-jitsu, and in jiu-jitsu I can be healthy because I don't have to cut 20 pounds to fight, because in wrestling that was the highest weight class. It's not like I could go up, right?
Okay.
When it came down to that, it was really clear, and I just like the jiu-jitsu lifestyle better than the wrestling lifestyle, and I like the vibe of the training and stuff. So that's kind of what saved me. And people really say like jiu-jitsu saved my life all the time, and I love that saying because it means something different to so many different people. But for me, it really was like that. I was 19, or 18. Yeah, I was 18. I had just gotten home from college. I was lost. I was really sick and unhealthy and just like didn't know what I was going to do. And I don't think I would have been able to step away from wrestling if I didn't have jiu-jitsu to dive into, because I was just so much energy and I had to put it somewhere, and
so much
I couldn't do that anymore. And I went to the world, and that's really what happened. Is I went to the world in May, June of that year. I came home in the spring and went to the world, and I remember watching Be a Mosquito, and my friend who was a brown belt at the time, we were talking about, and I was like, yeah, but you can't make money in jiu-jitsu. And he was like, what do you mean? She's going on like a giant seminar tour after this, and every seminar she's going to make like, $5,000, and then every like event she's going to, and her sponsors and this and this. And I was like, that's I've been disconnected from jiu-jitsu for like 6 years. So I didn't know.
Right, it's like you missed that kind of growth while you were.
I missed it, and my parents knew. Exactly. I'd kind of missed that jump, and so when he told me that, and then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go train, and I had so much fun, and then the rest is history, and that was like in 2016, so about 5 years ago now. Yeah, so it's been 5 years since I've been in jiu-jitsu as an adult, and I came back like technically as a blue belt because I competed as a blue belt in 12 and 13 because I had to go with the women because there just wasn't anyone for me. But then I left. And so my dad like dragged me into school on my 16th birthday to give me my blue belt and like shorts and a t-shirt. It was so ridiculous. And then, yes, I came back in 2016. I was a blue belt, and that was about 5 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that pivot, you talked about your kind of falling out with wrestling, mostly motivated by health concerns, right? I know the weight cuts in wrestling are brutal. I don't think jiu-jitsu has the same kind of I'm trying to think of the right word. People don't cut and fight on the same day in jiu-jitsu, but in wrestling you cut more or less over the week, and a lot of weight for some fighters, and then you fight at those weights.
Yeah, there's more expectation and acceptance around weight cutting in high school. Weight cutting in wrestling, and it really starts at like very young ages. Like people start having their kids change their weight classes and stuff like 5 and 6 years old. It's really, really scary. Like, oh, Johnny, you're gonna skip dinner because tomorrow you have to be, 55 pounds, and right now you're 56.
Correct.
And when you put that, of course, like when you put that in a kid's mind, and then that's repeated over and over and over, and it's like, I'm only good enough if I'm X amount of weight, and I'm only good to compete if I'm at this. And my parents are only excited about me wrestling if I blah, blah, blah. So, and it gets like really dark from there. Luckily, I was not in that position. My parents were very, very against weight cutting, which caused like some problems, with me growing up. That was really tough. Because I was like, no, I want to do this. And they were like, you can't. And I was like, well, you can't make me eat, like, and you can't.
I'm going to starve
you
myself. That's
right.
crazy. Yeah.
And so it's really, really tough for parents, right? But anyway, so it gets really bad in high school. But then these habits are built. They're pretty much, I don't want to sound, I can't speak for everybody, but if you look around in a wrestling room, there's a very high percentage of people with eating disorder-like behavior. And if you walk into like most wrestling competitions, if you just look around, and this is high school, not at the elite levels, but most high school coaches are severely overweight, and it's, in my opinion, and a lot of wrestlers' opinion, it's because they had their own issues with weight cutting, and then no one really ever taught them different. And so then they teach their athletes to do the same thing, and then they're, unhappy. And it's really unfortunate, and there's not a lot of education around that. Once you get up into the higher levels of wrestling, like with international teams, they try to teach you these kinds of things, but by then, you've been doing this for most people. I was different. I started late. Most people like 10 plus years.
Your whole young life as well. Yeah. Alrighty, I'm cognizant that I could very easily, without realizing, derail this whole interview into talking about wrestling. The GB crew who know me know I love wrestling. I follow wrestling, even though we don't have as much of it here in this country. So let's go back to Jiu-Jitsu. You've been training now since you were young, right? I mean, you said yourself, you kind of grew up on the mats. It felt normal to you because that was just your whole world. So I think it's fair to say Jiu-Jitsu is far more than just a hobby. It's a lifestyle for you. Throughout that whole process, from your 5 to now you're 23, world champion, who have been some of your biggest influences across that time span?
Definitely my dad. My dad, he started jiu-jitsu a little bit later, like in his early 30s. But when I say that, like, he started jiu-jitsu later for like an athlete. Like, he went in like crazy training 2-3 times a day, like in his mid 30s, and just went crazy like that. And competed and pretty much won everything there is to win at the colored belts, and then at black belt started competing at the masters and won masters worlds and stuff. So that was really cool for me to see as a kid, because it was an inspiration, but it was also kind of like, it really made that normal for me. So I didn't really overthink competing too much as a child, because I just, like, me and my dad would go fight, and my mom did too, just so that was cool. And then also Anna Laura, Professor Anna Laura, who runs GB Upland here, ADCC champion. Oh, she came to Australia, I think, like right before COVID. Is that right? Yeah, she was here. Yes. She was there. I remember when she went on her little tour. She's incredible, amazing, mentor to me, and just so many others like have really touched me in different ways in different parts of my journey. But my dad is my professor, and then also another person who's been a big part of my career is my partner, Saul, because he literally is the only person, like, I refuse to do this. I'm not saying I recommend this, but I refuse to like watch tape and like learn and do it. Like, he's so into that. So he'll watch my jiu-jitsu, he'll be like, okay, we need to work on this. Then he'll watch like a Gordon DVD on it, and then he'll be like, okay, let's drill this. And I'm like, thank you, because I not want to do that. So definitely
does your homework for you, hey?
Yeah, exactly. So those 3, I think, are the big ones.
And actually, maybe a follow-up question: how do you feel now that you're in a space within jiu-jitsu? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong. But you're, as a top shelf athlete, making a name for herself in the sport, fighting on these big sort of exhibition style tournaments, not just the IBJJF circuit. How does it feel? What's it like occupying a space around these other big names within the sport? Do you meet them and it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting Anna Laura, I'm meeting Bia Mesquita, or do you just feel so embedded in jiu-jitsu now that they're just kind of different people in a kimono?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting question because in my like if I try to look at it in a black and white sense, I'm kind of in the place where like I'm getting established, but I'm not like, one of those legends who has, been doing this for a very long time, still very young, like I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my prime just yet. So it's kind of weird because I think I'm at the place where a lot of them like know me, but we're not super close friends. And so I'll be like, I don't know if like, am I supposed to introduce myself? Am I supposed to just act like we're friends already? Like you follow me on Instagram and like we DM sometimes, but I've never actually
Yeah.
talked to you. So I definitely still have that a little bit.
Mm.
I would say I've always been the kind of person who's never really gotten like freaked out by like celebrities and movie stars and stuff just in general. So I think like with my personality, I'm kind of like pretty relaxed around people. But it is really cool to see these people. Like, I recently got asked to fight Dia Mosquita on a certain organization, and I think that might
Wow.
happen.
Whoa.
And that's kind of wild. Where I'm like, I like watched you growing up when I was like when I saw Gabby Garcia, I was like, I've been watching you since I was a kid. Like this is so
Yeah.
cool. Like never like the person, of course, like, whoever it ends up being in front of me, that's cool. But just the idea of like, oh
Mm.
my God, you are like my idol and now you're my competitor.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah. That
pretty
would.
cool. And it's a good reminder that like we all start in the same place. Like the starting line is the same for everybody, and there's no limitation on where the end line is. So just because you're looking and saying like, oh my God, so and so is so good, or how do they do that, or how do they do this, or I could never do that. Like none of those limitations are real,
Mm.
right? Because
Mm.
everyone ends up watching. Everyone who's great starts at the same place, watches their idols, and then those idols become the competitors, and then they probably start beating those people that were their idols, and now they're the champion who's someone else's idol, and there's someone coming. There's
Yeah.
always someone coming like down the
Yeah.
line. So yeah,
You've like segued perfectly into my next question, Kendall. That's remarkable. I was
perfect.
I
How'd
was
I know?
gonna psychic. It's a black belt superpower. I can't wait till I get mine. I was gonna ask for the space you're in, right? And being asked to fight someone like Bia Mosquito
Hmm.
must be terrifically motivating. I imagine. It's like, oh my gosh, what a
Yeah.
crazy opportunity. But so then, for maybe they're younger athletes or just newer to the sport, maybe jujitsu sort of somewhere a hobby at the moment, but transitioning into something where they want to put more time and energy into it. What sort of advice do you think you give to someone in that situation? I mean, you spoke about how you kind of need to destroy those expectations that you're not that person or you can't be that person. But what else would you say to people who want to, whether it's to just
Yeah.
make jujitsu part of their life or become competitors? What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a great question because I was that person. I am that person. Like I am currently that person who wants to do more and more and more. And I was at a different version of that. And then, now I'm at a different version of that. And that's
Mm.
gonna keep evolving. So I think like keeping that reality in mind that like literally there are no limitations. There just aren't. So that's important. And then the idea of like someone's got to stand at the top of the podium. Like someone's got to be there. So why wouldn't it just be me? Like, why can't I be in that position? If
Mm.
someone's going to do it, it could be me. But lastly, like, as far as tangible, like, really action related advice, the number one thing that I did, and I wish I did even more, is take any and all opportunities you can to compete, to put your name out there, to do podcasts, to do interviews, to have
Mm.
lunch with someone at a tournament that you just, you run into jujitsu people at the tournament. You're like, hey, like, do you want to sit together because we're both at the same restaurant? Like, or in our case in particular, because of our team, which is very unique, is like train as many GBs as you can, go and meet different instructors, make friends at other schools. All these things are so 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 important. Like, yes, for connections and who you're going to meet and things like that, but also like the experience that you're going to get competing is invaluable. It is so unmatched. And once you are on more of the competitive radar, like especially like purple, brown, black belt, but especially at black belt, once there's more of like eyes on you, you feel a different kind of pressure. It's not to say you have to like succumb to that, and you're not going to fight a lot because people care more. Because I still try to take everything that I can, take any opportunity I can get. But it's a little bit of an easier job to do when it's not being posted on Flow Grappling, right? So
Mm.
when you're
For sure.
when
For
you know
sure.
coming up, like do things for free. drive 6 hours to go do the stupid thing that like may or may not even be like worth the match. Like all those little things matter because you never know what you're going to learn from that experience. You never know the confidence that you're going to gain. You never know what stupid little mistake you're going to make and then correct and be like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that again. And you don't do that to the world, right? You never know who's going to be there watching, who's going to meet you, what, like it's just, that is the number one thing I would do because a lot of times right now what we're seeing is this weird like stage of it's like know your worth is like turning into like a lot of prima donnas in jiu-jitsu where people are like, I'm not going unless I'm paid. And I'm like, dude, this is good for your career. Like, this is good exposure for you. Like, nobody knows who you are right now. And that's like you should be paying them to be on the event, that kind of thing. Until you're bringing like eyeballs and the value and you have all the titles, then of course I'm all for like negotiate, make the right money, don't get like screwed over, those kinds of things. Yeah. But when you're building your career, that is value to you. So I think that's really important. And then lastly on that is just find people that have similar goals to you and just spend as much time as you can with them. It doesn't mean you can't have friends with different goals. I have tons of friends with different goals, but I have a really tight-knit group of people who all want the same thing and we're not going to leave each other behind, and it's like, I'm like grabbing them and lifting them up and then boom, they're up here. Now they're grabbing me and lifting me up and it just goes and goes and goes. So the people you spend your time with are everything, 100,000%. You'll turn into them whether you like it or not, but you better pick good ones.
I think some students have already said sometimes I talk in a Brazilian accent, so hopefully I don't turn too much into my professor.
I can do that sometimes. You're not alone.
Oh dear, what's happening to us? Alrighty. Well, look, we're powering through the time. The time always flies by in these interviews. I love it and I hate it. I want to talk a little bit with you now about training and competition. I think maybe you have some terrific things to tell us there. Like I mentioned before, I love wrestling, and trying to add wrestling to jiu-jitsu is something that I felt has brought massive gain to jiu-jitsu. So I want to know your thoughts on just cross-training in the general sense, because you've grown up doing BJJ, judo, and wrestling all together. I'm not sure if there's other sports or activities you've done side by side with jiu-jitsu, but for both, seasoned competitors or just people who jiu-jitsu is a hobby, what do you think about cross-training and how to try and incorporate it and what to look for, perhaps, in how you cross-train?
Yeah, I mean, there's two categories here. Like, one, there's stuff that I just do for fun. Like, I go to hot yoga because I really, really like it, and it's nice for me, and it kind of gets me out of my routine, and it's something that's a little bit different. I don't have to be teaching. I'm not in the driver's seat. I get to chill and enjoy it. So there's that category, right? And then as far as, like, specifically for competition, I would say, like, it can definitely be worthwhile to go and take, like, traditional judo classes or go find a wrestling club or things like that. But what I would say, it's funny you asked me this because I'm about to like plug my own instructionals coming out like next week on takedown. But I would say like there's a lot of resources for this, right? For like judo, takedowns, wrestling, things like that. That finding people who know how to do those things and have adjusted them for jiu-jitsu and use them at a high level in jiu-jitsu is a lot more valuable to me, because there are a lot of adjustments to be made. That's why they're different sports or different activities, right? And so if you just take like, I'm a black belt in one and a black belt in another, you still have a lot of fusing to do to make that make sense and to not make mistakes. So if you find someone who's already done that and is using that fused version at a very high level, then you're going to be a lot more likely to learn faster and just expedite the process, right? Not waste any time.
On that note then, you had this huge focus on competitive wrestling, or wrestling at a competitive level, and then switched to jiu-jitsu. Was making that leap, I mean, obviously you have to, put your focus back into things like the guard and passing guard in jiu-jitsu. So there's some very obvious accommodations you have to make. But did you have to work hard to develop your wrestling for BJJ? I mean, it's palpable watching you fight that you have a wrestling background.
Right. Yeah, it was hard. I mean, I got choked so much. I got guillotined so much. Like when I came into jiu-jitsu, because I was just like, my head, I just wasn't aware of those things. In wrestling, you don't have to worry. No one can choke you, and then things like diving in on like low singles, finishing those, I'd get caught in triangles all the time because I'd leave my arm in between the person's legs. So yeah, there was a lot of adjustment to be made. especially with the fact that people can pull guard. So you have to figure out how to shoot before they can make a grip on you, which is like ridiculous. It's crazy. It's so annoying, the timing thing, and then you're gonna sit and stand up for the advantage and like all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of adjustments that were made. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to do an instructional, because I was like, dude, I wish someone could have taught me how to adjust this and I didn't have to waste so much time like getting choked.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot.
Fast track the process, perhaps.
Exactly. That's what teachers are for, you know? Like you can go and watch a lot of jiu-jitsu videos and practice on your friend at home, but why would you do that when you can go to someone who's already an expert and can fast track the process for you in a lot less painful of a way, right? So that's the idea there.
Wicked. Alrighty, cross training. Tick. I wanted to ask you as well about injuries in this sport. You've been training since you were 5.
Oh, my favorite.
Yeah. Oh, really? You like to talk about injuries? I love asking people about injuries.
Oh,
What have you had any major injuries in the almost 20 years you've been a grappler?
Yeah, I have, and I would say most of them actually stem from wrestling. I had like some serious spinal injuries in my neck from wrestling. I had some serious spinal injuries in my low back. I dislocated my elbow. I had like partial tears and different ligaments of my knee, bad ankle injuries. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. But I would say most of it came from wrestling. And then the major issue is not that like wrestling is so horrible. It's just that like in high school, there was this mentality of like, you train full speed, or like you're like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a bad word. Like you're a bad word. Sorry. You're a baby.
You're out.
There we
you're
go.
Left outside. Yeah.
You're out. You're a baby, and we're all gonna make fun of you, and we're all gonna make it very clear that like we're really upset with you right now, and like we're disappointed in you. And so there was no like recovery, you know. And so that was the major issue. Is like if I had an injury, that was going to be like a year long. Like I'm going to train with it until it somehow heals back in a weird way. So, but in jiu-jitsu, I had a really bad injury last year. I had a a slight fracture in my L4, can't believe I don't remember, but yeah, I think my L4 vertebrae in my spine, and that was the first time that something really took me off the mat for like multiple months at a time. Like couldn't even like stand up and walk around. It was really bad. I couldn't even teach. I couldn't do anything. So that was rough.
Crikey.
Sorry, I thought you were gonna ask something, but then I was able to be good. But I did. But you know what I did? And this is getting to the helpful part. Like, if you have an injury, for me, the number one best thing to do was to treat it like training. So with my back, like with a knee or an ankle, you can go to the academy and there are certain things you can do. You just be vocal with your partner and like, hey, like I can only work on top, or hey, I'm going to drill this instead of sparring because I can't, because of whatever. So there's stuff you can do. With my injury in particular, just because of the severity of it, there was a long period of time where I literally could not do anything. I didn't go on the mat. It was crazy. So I scheduled my PT session, my physical therapy sessions at the same time of my competition training. And then I scheduled my like cardio or mobility or my meetings with my mental coach or like anything else that could fit into that structure during my training time. And the reason I did that is because for me, I get so much confidence and this feeling of self-esteem and excitement from sticking to my routine and being like, okay, I did it, check it off the box. Like for me, it was important to still feel like I was a professional athlete. Like I'm still doing what I need to be doing, instead of just like, okay, like I kind of went to PT and then I went home and like, you know, it's just like, for me, I need structure. So doing that, I still felt like I was training. I was like, on Monday at 9 a.m., I go here, and at Wednesday at 9 a.m., I go here, Friday 9 a.m., I go here, and then everything was just plugged into place. And doing that really helped me view my injury as my training and as progress. And then I would watch film at certain times. So then by the time I got back on the map, I actually felt like I was better at jiu-jitsu. Weekly enough, you know, because I don't even like watching film.
Growth through an injury. Wild. While you're talking about structure, I thought I was going to start asking some more questions about competition. But before this interview, me and Coach Romina were talking, and one of the sentiments that came up was, how the hell do you find the time to do all these different things, to train, to travel, to produce content? And maybe it's a bit of a leap from talking about injuries, but how do you, especially for some people who train, I mean, you're a full-time athlete, Of course, it takes up all your time, but you don't have a office job you're also running on the side. You don't have kids that you're raising. How do you think jiu-jitsu is notoriously difficult sometimes for people to get to training? What advice do you have for people to try kind of, best engineer their life around jiu-jitsu and just make the time for themselves to train?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, we're about to open our fourth school, and so I run and manage and teach at 3 right now, and are about to do 4. I run an online coaching business. I do all my own social media. I do all my own management, like negotiations, and then training, and there's a couple other things on the list, right? So the reason I say that is because I live like a very self-centric life. Like everything I do revolves around like my own career, and I have relationships with people, of course, but I don't have just the people in my life know that about me, and that's how at 23 how I like to live my life, right? So all that being said, when I structure out my time, like every single morning there's a to-do list. And the reason I do this is actually not like, oh my God, hustle hard, get as much as you can. Like it doesn't feel like that for me. It's more of just like, for me, I know if I set like, and this is like 6 things, and I do other things, but I'll just be like, make sure I have fun at training. Post one thing to Instagram, and then like call my grandma because it's her birthday, and I'll have 6 things on the list, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that is so important to my routine is because there's always times throughout the day where all of a sudden, like, you get in the car after being at the grocery store, and then you're like kind of like on your phone for 15 minutes before you leave, or you're get home and you have like a 30-minute time period to like shower and start making dinner, or things like that. So we don't realize a lot of times how much time like escapes away from us. But because I have that list, every time I start to notice myself slipping into like zone out mode, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I was gonna do that thing, okay, boom, and then I get it done, and then I'm like, damn, it feels good, just mark that off my list, what's the other thing? And so it's just kind of a way to like keep myself in check. So with people who have a lot of stuff going on, people they're responsible for, and children, and jobs that are totally separate, I would say like make it almost like a game. Like training is like a game. Like you have a set schedule, and like that schedule doesn't change, of course, with extenuating circumstances, but like I have a game, and then at the end of my training, like have a buddy that you like check in with, that you text, like a group chat of like 4 people, like, hey, like my training was awesome tonight, this happened, I got tapped out, but like I passed so and so's guard or whatever. And then like on Tuesday when they train, they text you, and you have this kind of like a little bit of an accountability crew. Lastly, get super, I mean, everybody here is, I'm preaching to the choir, right? You guys are like the people who are involved in your school, but the best thing that I can say is like get involved, like I love this saying of like the herd of sheep, like the one on the outside is the one that gets picked up by the wolf, like the one in the middle of the herd who's like friends, who's like trying to make friends, and they're in the plans, and they're communicating, and they're being there. Those people stick the longest, at least from what I've seen in 18 years of being in jiu-jitsu schools. Those are the people that have the most consistency. They may disappear for a month every once in a while because something happens with their kid at school or whatever, they're going through a divorce, or parents get sick, or they get laid off. Those things happen, but they always come back because they're in the middle of the herd. So get involved. But you guys are here, so you're doing that.
That's a brutal image to describe training in jiu-jitsu. Guys, I promise you, if you train jiu-jitsu, you're not going to get eaten by anyone just because you skipped class, okay? Super quick, there's some questions starting to pop up, so maybe we'll get to those in just a moment. I just wanted to ask quickly about competition mentality, right? I have 2 main questions. One is, just because I want to ask, has wrestling influenced how you approach competition? Because I know wrestling competitions just like look brutal, and the pace and pressure and the training that comes before it. So that's question number 1. And then question number 2, more generally speaking, what do you do before or during competition day? I don't mean physical routine like training, but for your brain, for your mind, before you fight.
Yeah, I always say, I've said this so many times, that I think I've beaten many people that like technically have better jiu-jitsu than me, just because I'm like super resilient and I have a great mindset going into competition, and I do a lot of visualization. And so the jiu-jitsu is important. You can't do it without it, right? But I think sometimes it comes down to like not who has the best jiu-jitsu, but who can perform the best on that day. And if you believe that you can perform the best, and that might be enough to carry you through. Even if someone has better jiu-jitsu than you, then you literally can beat anybody, you know. So first question was wrestling. I would say like wrestling made me a lot more intense of a person. I used to, like, my parents have this running joke that when I started judo, I would always lose my first match and then come back and win third. Um, because I would just like go out and be like, ah, la, la, la.
Yeah.
And then I lose them, and I'd be so angry, and then I would just Ippon throw everybody because that would be so bad. And they'd be like, why can't you do that on the first match? And I'd be like, I don't know, I just need to get me angry. So when I was a kid, that's how I was. And then I was always very intense, but I wasn't like aggressive, I guess. And then I tried wrestling, and you don't have a choice because people are like smacking you in the face and pushing you around, and, like kicking you as like a foot sweep and like, all this ridiculous stuff. And plus your coaches are yelling at you all the time. Now, I'm not saying that's like the number one way to get mental toughness, because there are other ways to do it, but that was one way that changed the way that I looked at competition. It just raised a level of intensity and like ferocity that I had, and I brought that into jiu-jitsu. And you will, any high level like purple, brown, and black belt like match that you see, male or female, like has that level of intensity for sure. Like you're not going to see lax stuff, but coming in as a blue belt, competing, I had a big edge over some of the girls who were not as experienced in that sense. Not to say there weren't some that weren't super intense, because there were, but overall, because they've been training a little bit less as long, they don't have quite as much competition experience, so they haven't developed their persona yet, you know, their competition persona.
Sure.
Whereas some of the, you know, purple, brown, and black belts who've been competing a couple more years, they usually are starting to find themselves and who they want to be when they show up on the mat. So before my competition prep, like as soon as I decide to do a competition, it starts. And so, for example, like I'm going to compete in Who's Number One, September 25th and 26th. And as soon as I got invited to that, like I would turn my computer around, but it's too much. But I have like a whiteboard, and like I write on it, like I am the Who's Number One champion, September 25th to 26th. I cannot read that far without my glasses. You think I read it every day. I outwork everybody.
It's almost 2 a.m.
and I never stop attacking.
You're
Exactly. Thank you. I outwork everybody, and I never stop attacking, right? So that's my like mantra going into the competition.
Yeah.
And every single training session I have, like that's the mantra that I go into with the training. So I treat the training like a competition. So when I'm training, this is really helpful for me, is I visualize while I'm training. So I do separate visualization where I'll close my eyes and run myself through the whole competition experience, from like driving there, waking up in the hotel or your home or whatever, driving there, doing your warm up, seeing the people, getting nervous. Cause like I tell like my competition kids when I run them through this, I'm like, it's okay if they have 4 stripes and you have 3, and that makes you a little bit nervous, you know, like all these things that are so human that we all deal with. Right. And that's okay, because like to act like it doesn't happen, it just makes the problem bigger. It just makes it worse. But if you're like, yeah, that made me a little nervous, but like also I'm going to perform better than them, that's like so much more helpful. So going through that whole thing, all the feelings of how I want my match to go this way, like step 1, 2, 3, boom, match over. I tap them out, like as if I did that in 90 seconds, right? Really seeing that happen, going to the podium, getting my medal, all those feelings and emotions, going out to eat with my team. Like I literally make it real before it's real. So there's that. But then during training, I act like my competitors are watching, right? Like I visualize as if my competitors are watching, and I'm already in the ring in the middle. And so like every round, does not matter how dead dog tired I am. Like I might have just got shark tanked for like 15 minutes. I might be like about to collapse. I will not lay down on the mat. Every single time I get up, I take a big breath. My head is up. I don't like hang over on my knees. There's a 2-minute timer in between whatever. I tie my hair. I pick my next partner before the time is up, so that I'm not starting like 10 seconds late. I get my water, and I'm like literally walking around imagining like whoever I just fought, like looking sad, and like my arm raised, like while all this is happening. Like I'm getting my water, fixing my hair. And then by the time like the buzzer rings, I have my next partner, and it's like my next competitor, whether I imagine it being, you know, Gabby Garcia again, or I'm, you know, imagine it being Rafaela or a different person in the bracket. It starts all over again, and all the other 7 or the other 6 are watching, and I'm fighting that one, right? So that has been so helpful for me, because because I make it very real. Like I get really emotional about it, where I'm like nervous. It sounds so silly because I'm like, I'm not fighting this person right now. I'm training with Jake or whoever. But in my head, like, I'm put myself there because I know that when I show up on competition day, I've already done it 100 times. You know, in my head, I've done it 100 times. There's no replacement for competition. It's not like delusion where you're like, oh yeah, I've already done this. But it feels like I've put my nervous system through this kind of pressure already, to the best of my ability as much as I could. And so I go into the competition. Another thing I do is I listen to the same song for like the hour. Sorry, my thing just made a noise. I don't know if you guys heard it. The hour before I compete, I listen to the same song on repeat because I don't like any distractions. So not even like changing the song. Like I don't even want to have to like deal with that.
What's the song?
I kind of cycle through. Right now the one I'm listening to has a bad word in it. Oh. But if you want to know it, send me a message on Instagram and I'll send it.
Okay. All right. I'll disseminate it through. Yeah.
It's been Nicki Minaj before. This one's like a really bad word, otherwise I would say it. Just in case anyone, there's children and stuff.
No, very sensible.
Anyway.
Other guests don't do that, so I appreciate it.
I teach kids, so you get kind of used to things. But yeah, so I'll listen to the same song. My phone goes on airplane mode, and I visualize the matches as I want them to happen, like all the way up until the end. And then, like if I'm on deck or in the hole, like so if I'm that's anywhere between like 10 and 20 minutes. In that time period, I'm usually pacing. I'm a pacer, like makes me feel better. And I'm hyping myself up. Like I go into like a persona. Like I need a name for it because I have like an alter ego like Beyonce does. And I just like, if you talk to me in the hour before I compete, I'm like a different person. I'm gonna have to like call back later because like I'm like, I tell myself some like intent. I'm like, no one deserves this the way I do. Like no one has done the work that I've put in. I've done everything that I could. Like I'm the sleep. I'm the best. Like all those kinds of things. Like I really go in because it gets me so amped, and I'm not afraid of feeling amped up because I train with that anxiety all the time. So that's kind of like an overview of my competition approach.
Right. So there's kind of like two components I think you mentioned, right? Is your visualization and then this your alter ego, your persona. Is developing those two things just kind of like skills? If someone wanted to kind of emulate this, obviously they can't copy exactly the way you do it. They need to do it for themselves. Would you just treat them like a skill you work on before every competition?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like if you're a little bit newer to this stuff, I would, whether it's me or somebody else, like copy someone's routine just to see what it feels like, and then you can kind of adjust from there. But there's no shame in copying. We all do the same stuff anyway. But yeah, it's practicing. So I actually just saw a message that was like really cool. So feeling the comp nerves just from hearing about the visualization, but visualizing during training sounds like a game changer.
Me too. That was scary.
So this is I put my comp kids and my comp adults through like a session before they compete. I'll be like, everyone lays down and closes their eyes, and I like run them through a whole thing, and it's really cool. So any kids coaches out there, it works really for me really well, or adults too. Anyway, I usually do it when I go to sleep. Some people can't do it when they go to sleep because they get too amped. For me, I start getting bored. And
I'll stay awake till 3 a.m. if I do it in bed. Start strangling the pillow.
Yeah. In the car before training is a good time because you're going to go move your body. So in the car before training, no one's going to bug you. Like close your eyes for 5 minutes and go in. And that's a really great way. For me, I get bored after a while, so I do fall asleep. But most people like, get amped up before they sleep. So I don't suggest it. But yeah, so, I mean, practicing during, usually some of Kendall's training. I love it. No, I mean, like, where do you think I didn't make this stuff up, I'm not an inventor. I just take what works and leave the rest, and then build around it. And I like Amy's question too in a second. Yeah,
I've got some other questions in DMs as well. So in just a moment, we'll start banging through them.
Yeah. No worries. We can go over a little bit too. No problem. So like the best way to practice it for competition, and this is why I started doing it in training, is to do it in training. It's like the stakes are very low. The worst thing that's going to happen is you don't feel great and then you have like a bad round or whatever. So the stakes are very low. You don't want to. The thing is, like, you don't want to go into training and try something new for the first. I mean, sorry, competition and try something new for the first time, because you don't know how you're going to react to it. You know, usually it's not going to be the end of the world. But why would you do that when you can practice it in training? The thing about that though is that it takes a lot of discipline. Like it really does, because it's a lot easier just to go in training and train, like to not really have to worry and to de-stress from the day and all that kind of thing. But if you go in with these plans and these intentions, you'll see jumps in your game very, very quickly. So practicing and training. And like one thing my mental performance coach taught me is like, again, nothing that you like, you can't do anything new on comp day and expect it to like be perfect. You do have to practice, just like you have to practice your jiu-jitsu. So the visualization, like leading up to a competition, I'll eventually put myself through like a comp simulation day where like I have an hour to compete. I, you know, do all my stuff. I listen to my music. Like I treat it like a competition, and then I have someone really tough in front of me to go ahead and do my fight. So I do put myself through simulations. Now, you can do that in a smaller scale though. You know, if you're not like have a gym and access to a whole gym by yourself or training partners on the weekends or things like that, you can do it in your house, you know, and just skip the match part. It sounds like that's the most important part, but it's really not, because that's what you do every day. You're already training all the time. What you really need to practice is the stuff that's out of your comfort zone, that's a little different, that's a little unique, which is usually the mental stuff and the preparation. So just practice as much as you can and make it part of your routine. You know, like really, really make it part of your routine, like 5 minutes at night or 5 minutes before you go into training. Like next, I know you guys are a little bit funny right now with the lockdowns and stuff, but you could start it now since you can't train. Like instead of doing it 5 minutes before you go train, like do it 5 minutes before you log on to your next Zoom meeting. You know, like literally that's all it takes. 5 minutes, sit down, close your eyes, visualize, boom, turn on my Zoom and I'm going, you know, and that will help build that habit. That's game changing. Like over a long period of time makes a big difference.
Wow. That is terrific advice, I think. I mean, wow. Yeah. Also, I can't wait I just want to go fight someone now. Far out, Kendall. Alrighty. It is 2 a.m. where Kendall is. So let's rip through some questions, and then let our guest get to bed. So, all the way at the top, the first question I have for you, Kendall, this is from Dia, who trains at Gracie Barra Carlton with myself and Professor Adolfo. He has asked, can you please ask if Kendall has any plans on doing MMA?
This is probably like my most asked question all the time, and my answer is yes if the weight classes were different. But I'm like 180, or I'm like 175, 180, and the highest weight class for women in the UFC is like 145. So at this time, absolutely no way. The only opportunity for me would be to like go to Japan and like fight with like Gabby Garcia and like grandmas that everyone makes fun of, and I'm like really just not interested in doing that. Like that's not really the MMA, like the competitive lifestyle that I'm interested in. So if I was going to fight seriously, it would be with like a serious organization. And if they had the weight classes, I would, but they don't. So we'll see in the future, maybe.
Who knows? Maybe they'll open a new weight class just for you, Professor.
Oh, well, yeah. We'll see. I think eventually it'll happen for sure. It's just hard to know, like, will it be within my competitive career or will it be after me, you know?
Fingers crossed we get to see you fight. 2 more questions. One from Shanna, one from Amelia. Both ask, you've been very vocal about this on Instagram, right? The sexual assault cases popping up in the jiu-jitsu world, and both have asked about what can we do, especially as a black belt and as a GB gym owner, says Shanna. What works to keep training gyms safe and respectful? I suppose that's primarily safe and respectful for the students, right? And what advice would you give to people in the jiu-jitsu community? So I suppose Shanna means, you know, people more broadly, not just the gym owners, to prevent abuse and continue to make sure jiu-jitsu is for everyone and is safe for everyone.
Yeah, I love our slogan, jiu-jitsu for everyone, and I kind of rephrase it just a tiny bit, like jiu-jitsu for everyone who is not going to abuse it, you know? So that's important, like not use it in a dangerous way, of course. So first and foremost, I think that women, like female leadership is extremely important in creating environments where women feel safe. And children as well, you know, because of the maternal instincts. Not to say, you know, men are not great kids and coaches, they are, but this is kind of a different energetic thing that we're talking about here. So I would say like very, very tangible action items, like things you can really implement, is having women teach classes or having women at the very least assist with classes and be like, even say, for example, you're a brand new academy and say a black belt opens a school with his wife, who's a blue belt, and they don't have any high ranking women. Use your wife as your crash dummy, when you're teaching. Like, use your wife as your uke. Like, people need to see the women in the front of the class. They need to like be shown examples. Sounds silly, but they need to be shown examples of how to treat women on the mats, right? And so it starts with the instructor, whether the instructor is using woman as an example or the woman is the instructor herself. So that's number one for kids and adults. And I would actually say it's more important for adults, to be honest, because it's like a little bit more of a male-dominated sport. So it's important that, we're showing that the women are to be respected. And again, it's important to say, like, this is not an insulting way. Like, most men don't need to be told, like, hey, women need to be respected, So I don't want it to come across like that, because that's not really what it is at all. It's two things. It's one, for those, that may have like questionable ideas about that, it sets the standard to be very, very clear. And two, it's more actually for the women to say, like, oh wow, like, this is a really safe place for me because like the women are teaching and I have someone I can go to, and either set the vibe of the school. So that's number one, and we can go into a lot of different topics with that, but overall, women in the front of the class teaching or helping instruct classes or being the UK. Two is really, in my opinion, it's very, very important that women have a say with who they train with, because there's a huge difference between men and women. I train with men so much, but even me, I'm a world champion. I can take care of myself. I'm a bigger girl. I'm very strong. But even me, there are men that I don't like to roll with because they're either just super aggressive or they just make me uncomfortable. I just get a weird vibe. Like, I get like a weird intuitive thing. And nobody should have to do a close contact sport. But it's very intimate the way that we do with someone that they feel uncomfortable with. Men too, not just women, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but it's a little bit more common with the size differential and the strength differential with and the injuries and stuff like that. A little more common with the women. So one way we approach this is when we line up to do our sparring. For me personally, I have two ways that I'll do it depending on the size of the class. If it's a smaller class, then I'll say, like, the first highest ranking one, like say it's a purple belt, I'll say, Sylvia, who do you want to roll with? She'll pick her partner. Then Ruby, who do you want to roll with? Pick your partner. Then Romina, who do you want to roll with? Pick your partner. Okay, boom. Then I go to the black belt. Okay, Professor Alex, who would you like to roll with? Professor Sam, who would you like to roll with? And then I go to like the black belt men. Then I go down the line. So it's women first, and then high ranking gets to choose lower. If I don't have time for that because it's a little time consuming, then I'll say, all right, ladies, go ahead and choose anybody you guys want to train with, whether it's each other or somebody else. Just pick a partner, find a spot on the mat, and I'll say, okay, gentlemen. And they'll pick a lot of times the men, but whatever, they get to choose. And then higher ranking gentlemen first, go choose your partner. And that way we kind of keep like the hierarchy of things, but we also are really respecting the women. And one thing that's really important with this is if you have men that you notice the women never choose, like, there may be an opportunity to ask a question there of like someone that you trust. Like, if there's a woman who's been training in your gym for a long time and you notice like none of the girls ever roll with James or whatever. Sorry if there's a James here. Then it's like, hey, so-and-so, you've been around in the gym for a long time. Like, I just want to, and you'll learn a lot. Like, anything you want to know about your school, just ask the women. They will tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my second thing. And then lastly, this is a longer question than intended, but it's an important one.
No,
so
I think literally taking notes.
This
is perfect.
I'm glad it's helpful. Is setting the tone with announcements and words and reminders. Like, almost every single class, I'm like, all right, guys, and I train, of course, I train hard, but every single class, I'm like, all right, guys, make sure with your partners, make sure we're training hard, we're being kind and respectful. Don't do anything to them you wouldn't want them to do to you. Make sure that you're not cranking submissions just for the sake of getting the tab. Make sure you have good technique. Don't knee them, in the groin. Like, just be very careful. Don't run into any other groups. I say this stuff over and over and over, because if you don't, a human being will do it. They just will, So, and they need to be reminded. And most people don't know what etiquette is in jiu-jitsu until they train for a long period of time. And so then I'll say another announcement, for example, and this is the instructor's responsibility, in my opinion, like, and any higher ranking students who like to speak up and kind of, help out in class, is just saying, like, hey guys, just remember we have a lot of different genders, sizes, ages, and abilities. So adjust accordingly. Like, if we're doing a line drill, like, adjust accordingly to who you're going with, be respectful. There's no pride in like muscling someone who's 100 pounds smaller than you, that's not good for you or for them. So just little things like that go a long way when it's consistent. If you do it once in 6 months because a girl complained to you and now you feel like you have to make an announcement, that's not really helpful, because it doesn't really change the environment. It just makes one girl feel really uncomfortable because she told on them, and then it makes everyone kind of like, oh my god, who was it? But if you're constantly talking about that, then it creates a change in the environment. But lastly, it creates a position where now, with all those things intact, anytime there is something small that happens, that the woman will almost always, or the man, feel comfortable coming to you with that information. And that's what we want. That's the biggest part of the problem, is that people don't feel comfortable, because people get kicked out of gyms for reporting stuff like this. It's insane. People literally get like ostracized and kicked out of their gyms and never spoken to again, and they get a reputation now in the community of like, whatever word you want to throw in, pick one, right? So if you have this kind of environment inside of school where people feel comfortable talking about these kinds of things, then you can avoid a lot of stuff from the beginning, right? So I hope that was helpful. Sorry, that was long.
Yeah, no, extremely. I took notes the whole time. I've been following your a lot of what you post on Instagram, guys. If you're listening and you haven't yet followed Kendall on Instagram, you should do so, because if you want to keep up to date with all this, I don't want to call it drama because I feel like that's condescending, but the sexual assault being talked about and sort of grappling in jiu-jitsu media, Kendall's a terrific resource. Now, let's continue. There was a question here that you actually spotted before while we were talking, Professor. Do you study your competitors and develop strategy accordingly?
Yes and no. So I would say Saul, my partner, does more of that than I do. I didn't used to. I always used to like to just go in and be like, I'm just going to go and compete. I don't care who I fight. And now I still have the mindset of like, no matter who I fight, I'm going to win, because I think it's important to have that mindset. But I also am at the point where like most of these girls, I've either fought before, or we know each other really well, or we've been around in the same brackets a lot. And so they're studying my game very, very closely. So it'd be naive to say like, oh, I don't need to know anything about their game, because the shorter answer, the answer that's a little more concise, is I do some studying to see if there's anything big where I'm like, oh, I didn't realize, or oh, I want to, change this or that, because that's pretty glaring. However, none of that changes my overall game. So my overall game stays the same. And then if there's small adjustments that I want to make for certain competitors, like for example, with Elizabeth Clay, I'm going to do a little bit more passing on my knees than I would be passing standing, because of the leg lock excellence that she has. But I'm not going to like double guard pull or like do something I normally wouldn't do. I'm just going to slightly adjust my game for any big glaring things like that. Or, for example, another with her is like, I'm going to attack the head a lot. I'm going to attack a lot of guillotines from the passing position, because that's how Anna Carolina beat her out, who's number one. It's how I had a good, successful match with her last year. And so, things like that. But I'm never going to like change and be like, oh, I'm going to try to double guard pull and leg lock her now, because it's like exactly. So a little bit, but not too much.
Still gonna hunt the beautiful knee tap takedown. You do so well. Speaking of takedowns, a question, we didn't really talk too much about judo through this interview. A question from, I am not sure what those initials stand from, sorry, our friend from Gracie Baja Hornsby. Can you please ask Professor about her judo experience? Kendall, please, can you tell us about your judo experience?
Yeah, so there it is. So judo experience, we touched on it just a little bit. I started judo when I was 7, and then I competed in judo until I was about 12 and 13. And that's when I started wrestling, and I stopped jiu-jitsu and judo. And this is an interesting example of like, I had a lot of great coaches around me. Judo is very organized, and I had like a really clear-cut path to like really try to attack, the Olympic, the Olympic track. So obviously I was very young, but it starts that young, and they're like, okay, you're going to do this year and this. And so I was really kind of in that category at the time, but I just didn't like judo as much as I liked jiu-jitsu. I really didn't enjoy it as much, and I ended up liking wrestling more. And so my judo experience has definitely played a huge role in my early wrestling success. And then as I learned wrestling and then I went back to jiu-jitsu, I used a lot of judo and wrestling in my jiu-jitsu combined. So it's like wrestling, jiu-jitsu, do, like all mixed together. So that's how I describe my stand-up game for sure.
Yeah, a beautiful blend. How good. I was hoping you'd say you don't need judo in front of Coach Romina, but didn't get what I wanted.
Oh my God.
There are a few students asking about a leopard print GB rash guard. Yeah, do you know the rash guard they're talking about? We watched a few of your fights on Tuesday night. I'm trying to remember who you were fighting against wearing the rash guard that they're so desperately hunting.
Yeah. So super easy. I have a couple sponsors that I work with, and that rash guard is made by Red Bowie, who's a sponsor, and they printed the GB logo on it. So I think if you wanted to get that, you could technically special order through Red Bowie and just message them on Instagram. The guy's really cool. He would just make it. The only thing is I don't wear it to the academy. It's not GB official. So I wouldn't wear it to the academy. You could wear it to lift or to work out, or to do other stuff, but it's technically not GB wear. So every time you'll catch me in something that's not GB wear is if I'm being paid to wear it. And if I'm being paid to wear it on a stage, then it's going to have my GB stuff on it. It might be a different brand, but it's not something that I'm wearing to training or teaching, but I'm just wearing it because I'm sponsored. But it was cute. I really liked it. I liked that one a lot.
I think you did just break my friend Storm's heart, though. With it's
I
not
know.
official.
I try to let her down softly, you could wear it to lift, and you can. But technically not official. We can message GB Wear on that one and make some requests.
Maybe that's what we need, Kendall. Someone with your kind of clout pushing GB Wear to produce.
Oh no! Now I'm gonna get in trouble.
Alrighty. Well, look, I think it might be time to wrap things up. Kendall, again, blown away that you did this interview at 1 a.m. your time. That's so sweet of you, allowing all these people to tune in and watch that, at a time that suits them. They can eat their dinner and listen to you talk. Thank you for telling us all about your jiu-jitsu experiences, competition, and otherwise, and the terrific answer you gave actually about, sexual assault in the jiu-jitsu community. Kendall, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, man. I had a great time, and thank you guys all for tuning in. It's crazy to almost 40 people are here just listening and hanging out. It's really, really special to be able to share jiu-jitsu with you guys from so far away. When I did come to Australia a couple of years ago, that's how I met Ruby. And Ruby, and I had never met, and she was just I'll pick you up and take you sightseeing. And I was like, oh my God, let's go, please. I was there alone. I was like, for sure. So we went and did a bunch of stuff, and from that moment on, I was just I love GB Australia. So now, she and Romina and I have, and there's so many people here, so I'm not trying to forget anyone. Karen and I see a lot of familiar faces. But just a lot of us have grown really close, and what you guys have in Australia, if you don't already know, is very, very special. I'm so sad that you guys are going through such a rough time right now, but stay as connected as you guys can to each other. Anytime you guys need anything, you guys can message me on Instagram. I may take forever to respond, but I will respond at some point. But please reach out to me there. And after this is all over, I'm going to be on my way to you because I can't wait to come visit you guys and see everybody, meet everyone in person. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I had a great time and hope some of that stuff was really helpful to you guys.
That's it. Thank you. I almost forgot. I'm glad I didn't make my black belt angry, but my professor Rodolfo would like to say a thank you and a goodbye, I think, just before we go. So I'll just pop him up here. You should be able to unmute, Professor. Away you go, brother.
Thanks for all these messages to everybody.
Kendall, thank you so much for the amazing interview. That was incredible. I think it transcended just the jiu-jitsu world and got into real life advice as well that people can transfer to other aspects of their life. So thank you so much. The part about visualizing before competing, I think you put that in an incredible way. I think everyone, especially the competitors, that should be copying that, including myself. And also thank you so much for putting your time so late there as well. So much to us. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Professor. That is so sweet. Don't worry, my training partners tomorrow will be really grateful that I didn't get it. They'll be fine. They'll be happy with it. So don't worry. It was good for everybody except for me. No, I'm just kidding. I had a great time.
Next time,
It was awesome.
we'll go the other way. We'll do it at like 2 a.m. our time.
No worries.
Easy.
It was awesome. Thank you guys
Awesome.
so much for having a good time with us, and it was great to see everybody.
Thank you. Guys, you can unmute yourselves and scream at Kendall before you leave if you like. Enjoy your dinner. Have a lovely evening, and I'll see some of you
Thank you,
very
Kendall.
soon. Us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're the
Thank
best.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
Kendall,
Thanks,
so good to
guys.
see you.
Thank you, Poha.
Michelle had to do it. It was
Thank you,
PG
Mr.
up until
Pedro.
then.
That's right.
Bye, guys. Thank you. And there's a lot of other people I met last time when I was in Australia, too. I can't see all your faces at one time, or I would just say everybody. So I see Professor Pedro in here. And, oh my gosh, so many. Can't wait to be back, though. It's going to be great.
Hell yeah. Always welcome.
Especially now that I know more people. I
That's
was a
it.
purple belt when I came last time.
What-
A little wee purple belt.
How many years ago was that? 4, maybe? 4, 5?
That was 2000. Ruby, was it 2017?
Yeah, it was. It was 2017.
Yeah.
The end of the year.
Yeah, that's right. It was like November, and I had just won my first ski world title in June, and like as a purple belt. And I remember, like, I didn't even think it was a big deal at all. I was like, oh, it's just purple belt. And I would get there, and people were like, oh my god, you won the world. And I was like, oh my god, you guys know that I won the world. This is so cool. I was like, oh my god, like I didn't even think it would matter. But, like I thought it was like so. I was like, oh, I'm just a purple belt. Now I look back and I wish that I would have like really let myself celebrate more wins and be proud of myself. But at the time, I was like, black belt, so it didn't even matter. And now I'm like, oh my god, I had so much fun. Why didn't I let myself be happy? Crazy. That's another piece of advice. Like enjoy it, because none of it's the end of the world. Nothing is the end of the world, literally. Not even black belt world. So enjoy it.
That's it. Not even a lockdown, guys. We're all gonna make it. We're all gonna make it.
You're all gonna make it.
My friends,
You're
I'm
gonna
gonna start
make
shutting
it.
down streams. That's it. There is no more. Thank you very much. Us.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Romina, for organizing it.
Yeah, shout out Coach
Thank you,
Romina for
Romina.
sliding